This show is sponsored by Bloomerang, a solution that helps nonprofits like Shower Up, which is a nonprofit providing mobile showers and personal care for those experiencing homelessness, to efficiently manage their volunteers and donors in one place. And thanks to Bloomerang, Shower Up increased their volunteer signups by 60% and first-time donors by making it easy to give right on their site. Shower Up's executive director, Paul Schmidt, said, Bloomerang is an ideal marriage of volunteer and donor management. The deeper we get into it, the more we love it. And if you want to see how Shower Up easily manages their volunteers and donors with Bloomerang, just go to jcsocialmarketing.com/Bloomerang. That's jcsocialmarketing.com/BLOOMERANG, or visit the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, let's get to the show. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. This is Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell. Today's question: how to raise money with $0 and 0 donors. This is the challenge facing many new and small nonprofits that are doing this powerful work in communities, but often with little to no budgets. And especially if you're a brand new organization, getting your first donations can be challenging, especially when you feel like you have little visibility or support. So I have the perfect guest this week to tackle this challenge. It's Tiffany Allen. Tiffany is the CEO of Boss on a Budget, which is a small firm that teaches communities to form strong nonprofits and obtain funding. Her passion is working with Black-led nonprofits and other new nonprofits, teaching them to use their skills and talents to get funding. Since 2016, she's worked with startup nonprofit founders, teaching them how to start nonprofit organizations from the ground up. She's a social worker by trade, and over the past 15 years has worked with national foundations, government agencies, and nonprofits to improve their services while listening to the voices of those impacted by their work. Tiffany, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Yes. I love this also in your bio. It says that your goal is to lift up the voice of the nonprofit founders who often go unseen, but are making change in their communities every single day, often with little support and no money. That's amazing. And that's really one of the things that I aim to do. And that's what I hope that I'm doing with this podcast. So just tell us a little bit about how you got started in nonprofit work. I know your bio said you are a social worker by trade.
Yes, it's really interesting. So when I was in grad school, one of my projects that I chose was to start a nonprofit, and it was with my church. So I got together a small board and we came up with a name, we came up with a mission statement. And then after about 3 months, it fizzled out and it completely failed. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought that once I registered with the state, I had 501c3 status and that was it. Didn't even know anything about an IRS form or like charitable solicitation. That failed. But it was funny, years later, I had a partner and he was launching a nonprofit. And so I helped him launch, but I was handling all the administrative stuff and I was handling the money and the accounting and the board. And I failed terribly. So I got all the letters in the mail from the state. This is overdue, all of it.
Oh, wow.
I was trying to figure out how to raise money because he was paying for everything out of his pockets. And I realized then that there wasn't a lot of information online for people who were starting from the ground up.
Mhm.
There was information about how to fundraise, and there was terms being used that wasn't natural to me because I wasn't necessarily in the fundraising field. I had done some fundraising because I was a social worker and I had my master's in social work, and it just didn't speak to me.
Mhm.
And so I started really training other people on grant writing from that point because I saw how difficult it was for me to figure that out. And the most interesting thing was at the same time, I was working a job where I was working with national foundations.
Mhm.
And I saw how they funded organizations, and it was not through proposals. Like it wasn't through the most magnetic proposal that people won, it was through relationships. So I
Yeah.
started teaching people how to get grants through relationships. And then I realized people don't even have their structures together. They don't even have a board. They don't even have a budget. And it
Mhm.
just evolved from there for
A
me
mission
teaching.
statement, like any kind of
Yes.
plan to submit to the grant.
Yes. That none of that was really in place for people, but they had the passion, and a lot of times they were doing the work and they were doing great work, but they
Mhm.
didn't know how to communicate that well. So Boston a Budget just evolved from how to get grants through relationships, through just how to structure your organization and raise money when you're starting literally from ground zero.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Mhm.
So, is it expensive to create a nonprofit? And if someone wants to begin, what needs to be in place to get started?
It's not necessarily expensive if you're doing it yourself. Now, some people prefer to go to the professionals, and there are some attorneys that will charge you a lot of money.
Mhm.
But if you do it yourself, generally the fees are not a lot at the state level and not too expensive with the IRS, depending on what form you use. But if you want to get started, you absolutely need a board. And that's what people skip over. They don't have a group of people doing this with them. A lot of times they have their own personal mission and they just do the paperwork and get started. But you need at least a core of 3 people who are aligned with you, who have the same idea of the mission of the organization, and you
Mhm.
know what your goals are for the year. And you need to have a name, of course, and you need to have a mission statement and some goals, and you need to understand who you're trying to serve and why you're serving them. Like that core stuff around like why do we exist? You need to work that through before you start the paperwork. That's really important for you to work through first.
Mhm. Absolutely. And actually, I have an interesting question for you. And I know you help people start nonprofits, but how do we know that we need to start a nonprofit? So maybe there's an organization doing similar work, or maybe it's something where it could just be a fundraising event where you raise money. How do you know that you really do need to start your own 501c3?
That's a great question. I would say if it's only for a personal need or to fulfill something for you personally, I would not do that. You absolutely need passion to do this work because it's hard, but that's not enough. You do
Mm.
need to assess the environment, assess your community, and see if there's something missing. So do your research, talk to people who would potentially be your clients, talk to other nonprofit staff or founders in your area to see what they do and what they provide to make sure you're not duplicating anything, but also to make sure you actually fulfill a need. And then ask yourself, do I have the capacity personally to do this? Because a lot of people don't assess that. They don't realize
Yeah.
that they're going to have to lead a whole organization, a whole
Mhm.
business. They more so think, oh, I'm going to help somebody. But
Right.
you need to do your own personal assessment and say, can this fit in my life with my family, with my job, and all of those things?
Mhm.
You need to assess that for yourself first and then figure out who can go along with you on this journey. Because if you go alone, you will burn out and it will take time for you to launch. So also assess, do enough people care about this mission, and will they go along with me? Will they work alongside with me? Will they donate money? Is it something compelling for people to join with me? So those are some of the things I would think about before I decided to start.
No, that's a really good point. And you have a pretty great almost manifesto on your website in one of your
Mhm.
blog posts where you talk about the mindset
Mhm.
required. And could you talk a little bit about that? I think we have to shift a lot of our beliefs when we start a nonprofit. Like
Mhm.
the first one that came to my mind is people don't owe us anything. So can
Mhm.
you talk about the mindset shift that you encourage your clients to go through and nonprofit founders to go through?
I'm glad you're talking about the mindset because I teach from that first. Whenever I do a training, I always talk about the beliefs. And what you believe or don't believe about yourself will impact your success.
Yes.
So, one of the things that I do share with people is that you do belong in the room. Like, you do deserve to be in certain spaces because people think that other people who have money or perceived power somehow are better or smarter than them. And that can prevent you from going after what you need. You are representing a community that's being unheard or unfulfilled or unserved. And your nonprofit can fill the gap for them. But if you don't feel like you belong, then you can't advocate effectively for them.
Yes.
So that's one thing that people really have to overcome. I think the other thing is people assume that 501c3 status is like a magic ticket and
Mm.
that once you have it, everything flows from there. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to do the work to prove to people why this is needed. Like, you have to educate people about why your organization is necessary, why your particular community needs you, because
Yep.
people aren't going to automatically get that. So part of you fundraising, part of you launching is you educating people about that process and building community around the problem you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that. So you deserve to be in the room.
Hmm.
I feel like what the work that I do with my nonprofit clients around social media and marketing, they
Hmm.
always think they're annoying people. They always think, oh, we're sending too many emails or we're sending too many communications. And often they're not sending enough. They're
Hmm.
not communicating enough and they're not educating people. And it's because of that sort of imposter syndrome, I think, that you're
Hmm.
talking about. So I think that's
Hmm.
really important. So you wrote a great blog post. I will put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. I'm so used to being on Zoom. I will put it in the show notes. It's called 21 Easy Ways to Make $30,000 for Your New Nonprofit. By the way, you are so good with headlines and like titles of things.
Thank
Like
you.
I just want to click on everything. Oh, with no grants, I should say.
Hmm.
So, what are some of these ways? How can a startup nonprofit get those first critical donations?
I would say the most important thing you need to do is assess your network and assess the network of the people on your board.
Mm,
So you have certain associations that you probably don't even realize you have. There are people who are connected to you personally, there are people who are connected to you socially and professionally. And they are much more likely to give to you in the beginning because of their attachment to you. Now, there are things you can do for people who don't know you to get them to be more engaged in your work. But the most effective thing to do first is to start with your network and to encourage your board to do the same thing. So you should be telling your family and your friends about the work that you're doing.
mm-hmm,
The mistake that people make, though, is they center it around the organization.
mm,
I'm starting a new organization. You need to support this new nonprofit. And that doesn't excite anybody but you. What
right.
excites people is, hey, I've noticed that this is missing in our community,
Yes.
or something needs to happen, something needs to change. Do you agree with me? Let's work together to make this change. Your dollars can make it happen. Instead of talking like that, inspiring people with an ask,
Yep.
a lot of people just go to, I'm starting a new organization, support me.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't center the mission. They don't center what people actually care about. Because
Mm-hmm.
people care about helping other people. They care about feeling good. And helping you start an organization isn't necessarily what's going to make them feel good.
Exactly. So you teach a lot about peer-to-peer fundraising. Is this where the peer-to-peer campaign would come in?
Absolutely. So it's my favorite way to make money in the beginning. And it's actually a strategy I use for an organization to help them raise $117,000 in like less than 6 months, because they had a lot of people who cared about the mission. So with peer to peer, you're using other people to raise money for your organization.
Mm,
You're using other people to be your ambassadors to talk about the work that you're doing. And because they're excited, they're passionate, they tap into their own networks, the people they know personally, socially, and professionally to give. And what that does is it creates your initial donor base. It
mm-hmm.
gives you something to work with. So once those people give one time, you now have an opportunity to wow them as an organization. So it matters how you communicate with them once they give that gift. Are you welcoming them to your organization? Are you sharing more about why you started once they give that gift? It is an incredible opportunity for you to win them over. And then you can ask them again and again to support and give more deeply or serve on your board or volunteer. Peer to peer fundraising is so powerful because it makes you visible in a way that it's harder to do or more expensive to do if you weren't using your network or the people.
What sort of technology do you recommend? Like for starting right off the bat, like you said, $0, zero budget. I know that we do have to invest some
Mhm.
money because would you say like a website's the first thing or a donation platform? What kind of technology do we need to start out?
Great question. So I think absolutely a website because people want to know who you are, and that's your opportunity where you can craft a message. You can control what
You
people
control
see
it.
and how they see it on the website. So absolutely, I think you need social media simply because it's free and simply because it gives you so much visibility. So I often tell people Facebook is a given because of the fundraising tools,
Hmm.
and Instagram is helpful because you can share video easily and people are attracted to the imagery. And LinkedIn, of course, is a great place to find professional connections, especially if you want to connect to like corporations or foundations easily or find who works there. LinkedIn is important, but just
Hmm.
don't overwhelm yourself. I think having a good donation platform beyond PayPal,
Hmm.
beyond Cash App, which I cannot stand it when
Yeah,
nonprofits use
seriously.
Cash App, but
Yeah.
I get why they do.
Hmm.
But you really need a good, solid donation platform that will send your donation receipts automatically, that will collect
Hmm.
the contact information of people, that will help you like track how much people gave and when they gave. You need data to help you figure out how to target those people again and reach back out to them. So donation platforms they've come a long way, and there are a lot that are free to you, right? There's a fee on the back end that sometimes the donor can cover, but they're not very expensive. And I think eventually you're going to need like a good CRM
Hmm.
or a donor relations database, whatever you want to call it, to track those communications you have with your donors. But those tend to be the ones that you have to invest in. It's less likely you're going to get a free one of those. So I would be thinking about that. And then I would just say like a good graphic design software like a Canva that
Hmm.
you can use to design materials when you're putting posts on social media, when you're designing your flyers and your one pagers. It's important to have something like that too.
Do you find that kind of like grassroots, almost like non digital outreach is effective? Maybe events or flyers or speaking? What do you think
Absolutely.
about that?
Yeah, I think the key to get people to give is for them to trust you,
Mm,
for them to see you show up. So the more you show up in your local area, I think the more credibility you build for yourself and for your organization.
yep.
So I recommend people do social media outreach, but also local outreach too.
Hmm.
You should be meeting people, meeting your local government officials, going to meetings, presenting on the work that you do, and find groups of people who care about the community. The churches care about the community. Certain clubs or associations care about what's happening in their community. And so you're trying to find people who are aligned with what you do. And that works through making presentations or
Hmm.
even being doing testimony for public hearings and stuff like that. Attaching yourself to local media and getting local stories, all of that matters.
I totally agree with that. I think about when I started my business because
Mhm.
starting a nonprofit is a lot like starting a small business. No one knows about you. You have no money and you've got to get visibility and clients and or donors. So what I did, I just talked at the Chamber of Commerce. I found literally any group that
Mhm.
would let me give a free talk on that was when I was doing grants and I did a lot of grant writing training as well.
Mhm.
And I found anyone that would give let me give a talk and I just wanted to make a name for myself.
Yep.
And it was hard work like pounding the pavement, but that absolutely helped me build my network going to those
Yep.
chamber of commerce wine and cheese nights and
Mhm.
like nonprofit professional networking events and I did all of that and it was really challenging, but I think the same philosophy totally applies. Like you have to get out there and get that snowball rolling, if
Yep.
you will.
Yep. I completely agree. And that's funny. I did the same thing. I
Yep.
would do free grant writing trainings in my
Yep.
community. I worked with SCORE and I would
Yes,
do,
I work with Score too.
yeah, just to get my name out there, but also just to learn my audience,
Yes.
to understand what they needed, to hear the language that they used when they talked about their problems or what they were struggling with. So that early work was really important.
Yes, to get that feedback is so critical. I do think for nonprofits as well to get the feedback, not just from the people you serve, but from the community members. Like,
Yep.
what is their opinion of this problem? And do they
Yep.
even know that this is a problem or a gap? Do
Yep.
they know that there are organizations out there to help? Like, a lot of people that don't work in nonprofits think that the government is
Mm-hmm.
the safety net. And as we
Yep.
know, there are huge holes in that safety net that we
Yep.
have to fill.
Yep.
So educating people on that.
Hey there. I'm interrupting this episode to share an absolutely free training that I created that's getting nonprofits of all sizes big results. Sure, you've been spending hours on social media, but what can you actually show for it? With all this posting and Instagramming and TikToking, does it really translate into action? In my free training, I'll show you exactly how to take people from passive fans to passionate supporters, and I'll give you specific steps to create social media content that actually converts. Head on over to nonprofitsthatconvert.com. Again, that's nonprofitsthatconvert.com, and start building a thriving social media community for your nonprofit right now without a big team, lots of tech overwhelm, or getting stuck on the question, what do I do next? Let me show you how it's done. I can't wait to see what you create.
So let's talk about grants. If I'm a brand new nonprofit, say I have maybe my 501c3, or I'm getting it. Where, like, how should I start? What do I need in place to start applying for grants? And then where can I look?
So I will say if you don't have your 501c3 status yet, you more than likely will not get a grant because the vast majority of grant funders want you to have that status first. But even if you're waiting to get it, there's work you can do. So make sure you have a clear, concise mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have a good problem or need statement. And that's basically communicating why your organization exists. Why do you need programming? Who do you serve? What are their biggest problems? What needs to be addressed? And how are you addressing it through your programming? So, making sure you're making that connection to the need and to what you're doing. And then making sure you're clear about the impact that it will make. So, what would that mean for that population when your program is in place? What difference would it make? Because a funder wants to see, okay, if I invest in this, what will happen as a result? And is it a solution that I'm also invested in or care about? So I would work on that. I would also work on the technical stuff like a
Mm-hmm.
budget.
Yes.
Most people I speak with have never done a budget and do not have a budget for
You
their
can't submit a
nonprofit.
grant without a budget, right? And
Right.
anticipated revenue, like a revenue forecast.
Most people either they do it because of a grant or they're just submitting anything when they have to do a grant because they just are trying to figure it out and trying to get
Mm-hmm.
funding. So you should be proactive and be clear for yourself how much money do you need for the year to actually run your organization and be realistic about that because that's how you'll get the funding you need to operate. And you also need to have your budget for each program. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing more than one program, you need to know how much it costs for each program to run and for the organization overall. And another thing that I find that people don't have is like the paperwork. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have their articles of incorporation. They don't have letters of support. They don't have financial statements. All those kind of things that you typically would submit for a grant, people don't typically have either. So you could spend that time organizing yourself to put everything together.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're ready, then I think to find grants, you always start local and small.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at the local, I always tell people banks, utility companies, and grocery stores. They
Yes,
all have foundations.
they
So
do.
start there. And they're typically easy to apply for, they're not very complicated. And it can help you get better at writing and get better at making your point when you do a lot of those applications yourself. So start there and
Mm-hmm.
absolutely talk to your community foundation. Most
Mm-hmm.
people don't know about the community foundations in their area. And that's one of the first places you need to start to understand what opportunities they have, but also they know of other donors and funders and they can help connect you to those people too.
Yeah, the community foundations are really an untapped resource, and they
Hmm.
provide so many free resources too. free
Mm-hmm.
trainings and free webinars. And like you said, they have often, I know in my area around Boston, there's a lot of Meet the Funder events.
Mm.
So they free like luncheon. It's a Meet the Funder event. Maybe it'll cost $10, something like that. But it's a panel of actual funders giving out grants, and they will
Yeah.
tell you what it takes and
Yeah.
what the pitfalls are that you will avoid and how to actually make your case and how to stand out.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a question that just came up to me now that I'm thinking about grant writing and outreach. Where does storytelling fit in? So
Mm.
how, when you're starting out, how do you get these great stories about the impact of your work? Maybe if your work
Mhm.
has not necessarily been going on very long, like where do we get these inspiring stories of what's possible?
I love that question. So, the best way to do that is interview people who are your potential clients or people who are connected to your cause or have done the work in your cause, and ask them important questions like, what would this mean for this person if they were to get this service? Why is this so important for this community to get this service? And when people begin to speak from the heart, they say some of the most powerful things that you can use for your storytelling, for your marketing, for your
Mhm.
fundraising, and your grant writing. When I helped that organization raise over six figures, the first thing I did was talk to people who, it was a coaching organization. I talked to people who were coaches. I talked to people who had been coached, and I needed them to tell me what it meant to be coached because I
Yeah.
hadn't had any experience in that industry before. I didn't know, but I was responsible for writing all the fundraising copy and
Yep.
designing the campaign.
Yep.
And they had not provided a service. Let me be clear. When
Mm.
they raised that much money, they hadn't provided one service yet. It was
Wow.
seed money for the
Wow.
for the organization. The name of the organization is Coaching for Everyone.
Coaching for everyone.
And I just talked to them and they told me what it was like to be coached. They told me how amazing it was. And I used that information when I wrote about the work and when I wrote about the possibilities. So when I wrote the copy, I used words like imagine if this community had this. And I inspired people about the possibilities and I got them
Yes.
excited about that. And that's what attracted people to the work.
Yay. People love that. They love to think about the vision and
Mm-hmm.
imagine if we had this in the community. And that's usually what I coach too, is if a nonprofit's launching a new program and they're like, we don't have any testimonials because we're launching it. And I said, there's a reason you're launching it
Mm-hmm.
and you want to get people excited about it. And there's a vision that you have for change. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can communicate that and get people inspired, I think all of these tips are actually really valuable. Everything you're sharing for an organization that maybe wants to pivot into a different direction or
Mm-hmm.
maybe wants to start a brand new program or service. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just for these nonprofits completely starting from the ground up. I think all of these tips are really valuable. So let's talk about your podcast, The Nonprofit Activator. I love the approach that you take. So who are your guests and what do you focus on?
So my guests are exclusively new and small nonprofit founders.
Oh, I love it.
Most of them have not been around for more than 5 years. And my first guests are people I've directly worked with in some way or have partnered with in some way. And I specifically wanted to give them a platform to share their stories because I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about new nonprofit founders. I feel like people assume that, first of all, that they're going to fail. I
Mm,
think people assume that the work isn't needed, or I think people count them out because they don't have a lot of financial resources. And because they don't have a lot of financial resources, they can't really be as effective or impactful. And I want to challenge that thought because in most circumstances, they've been doing the work for years,
mm,
even without a nonprofit, and have had created a lot of impact. It's
right.
just now they've created an organization so they can leverage more funding, but a lot of people don't give them credit for the work that they've done. And
Yeah.
if you're new and you haven't done a lot in their eyes, they're not necessarily going to give you a platform to talk about what your work is. And I wanted
Yeah.
to change that. So that's why I have my podcast.
Love it. So it's a lot of founder stories, case
Mm-hmm.
studies. So it's called The Nonprofit Activator. Anyone can find it in your podcast app. I'll, of course, link to it in the show notes. I think it's fantastic when we can showcase voices from the trenches. So I try to do that on this show as well and in a lot of my summits, my webinars, because people often feel so alone. They feel like they're
Yeah.
the only one going through this. And because there's no real, this leads me into your membership group. I
Yeah.
was going to say there aren't a lot of places where founders can network with other founders. So that leads me to your membership academy, or it's not an academy, your membership site. I'm so excited about this. I think it sounds like a definite gap in the market, in the nonprofit market. So tell us about your membership and what it's all about.
Sure. So it's called Activate Your Purpose and Profit. And I really created it because I've noticed that founders are so isolated, like you said, and they can't find a community of people who are going through what they're going through, or they can't find people who are willing to be vulnerable and honest about what they're experiencing. And it's just hard because a lot of nonprofit founders can be territorial because
Mhm.
they're fearful that if they reveal their special secrets, then somehow they're losing out on some resources or opportunities. So I wanted to create a space where people can learn from each other across the world, honestly, and also learn how to make money because that's the core problem.
Mhm.
They aren't able to scale or move forward because they don't have the resources to do it. So I just wanted to focus on that one problem and give them the skill sets they need to do that. But it's not even just the skill sets, it's just the encouragement. They just need the encouragement. They need the motivation to know they can do this.
Mhm.
And when someone believes they can do it, then they can.
Mhm.
But if they're not getting that constant encouragement, it makes that journey much more difficult. So I'm designing it in a way where we're going to talk every week and we're going to do one thing that's going to move us closer to our goal. And we're going to have accountability pods where people can come together and work and push each other to get to their goals. So I'm
Mhm.
very excited about it.
Well,
And my community is excited too. So I'm happy that I can create this space for them.
I love that. And I know, before I get to how people can work with you,
Mhm.
we're going into an election. We're in an election year, and there's so much noise. There's so much contentious media out there. I just wonder, do you have any inspiring words for these nonprofit professionals that are burned out, worn out, and just wondering how they're going to move forward this year?
What comes to mind for me is that media are designed to distract. Like that's the purpose. They're trying to get your attention. And a lot of times it can distract from what really is happening on the ground. And I feel like there's often a disconnect between the messages we're fed and what really is.
Mm.
So my only encouragement is just stay connected to your core and why you're doing this. And this is probably a popular opinion, maybe not, but you have to take care of yourself. And
Yes.
sometimes taking care of yourself means that you can't do what you've been doing. You can't sacrifice yourself for a mission. Sometimes you got to take a break. Sometimes you have to step back. And that's okay too.
Mhm.
That's not failure. Because even if you helped one person, you changed one person's life. And that is an impact. Just because you can't do it for years and years on end, or you have to step down, you still made a difference in someone's life. So my thing is take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and stay connected to your core and why you're doing this.
Mm. Put your mask on before you put
Yeah.
your other air masks on for people, like when you're
Yeah.
flying in an airplane. I think so. If you have no motivation and energy left, that's not going to serve your organization or your community
That's right.
in the way that you want to do it. So thank you. Where can people find out about you, Tiffany, and work with you?
Sure. So I am on YouTube. I go live every
Yes.
Sunday night at 8 p.m.
You are so
Eastern.
regular with those videos. It's incredible. It's every Sunday.
Every
Oh
Sunday,
my
8
gosh.
p.m. Eastern Standard. Just search Boss on a Budget. You'll find me. You can also go to my website, bossonabudget.com. And those two places are, you can pretty much find out anything that I have going on. As I said, I go live all the time. So just catch me one Sunday night.
Yeah, I know you have a nonprofit startup checklist. I'll put that in the show notes if you just go to bossonabudget.com. Love the name of that. How did the name of your business come about? I absolutely love it.
It's not anything profound. I just
I love
started looking out.
alliteration. Any way you can just,
I was just like, I know I want to target people who are starting, but I want to target people who don't have a lot of resources. So I just started putting words together. and boss and budget just came up for me. So I said, hey, boss and the budget.
Yeah, I love it. It really stands out. It's really cool. Thanks so much for being here, for sharing this wisdom and inspiration and just really nice words. I think ending on that note is really helpful and impactful. But best wishes for you. And I'm so excited to hear more about your membership. So thanks for telling us about it.
No problem. Thank you again for having me.
Hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review, because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.